Well, it is March Madness, and that means our instant previews continue to roll in. It is segment number 47, and tonight we are welcoming our good friend UConn men's basketball beat writer from Hearst, Connecticut Media and CTinsider.com, Dave Borges. Dave, thank you so much for returning to the instant preview and reaction series. How are things up in your area?
Things are going well. It's not snowing yet here on Monday night, and we'll see what happens overnight. And certainly the drive to Albany could be interesting, but so far so good.
Good. Thanks so much for coming on again. Yeah, of course, we'll be talking UConn men's basketball. They are the number 4 seed in the West region. They'll be taking on the MAC champs, the Iona Gales, the 13 seed, on Friday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern time on TBS from MVP Arena, home of the Siena Saints in the MAC. UConn comes in 25-8, 13-7. Dave, we saw them together against Marquette in the Big East semifinal on Friday night, where they fell 70-68. I want to start this off here and kick things off because obviously we got a chance to hear Dan Hurley, and I believe it was your question that you had asked him, and pretty much anybody up on the dais. How will they be able to, to recover from this, and will they be ready mentally and everything like that? But from what we heard, it seems as if that this is a completely different team from last season that had lost by 7 points in the first round. What are your thoughts there? Heading into the first round this time around against Iona.
Yeah, Dan acknowledges that. Certainly last year the team went in a little tight. I mean, the thing is he really preaches all season how badly they want to win that Big East tournament. And every team wants to win it, of course, but they carry around a picture of the trophy all season as inspiration. And I think last year when they didn't win it, they lost in the semifinals to Villanova. It just kind of let the air out of their sails, and then they just never quite recovered, and they just seemed a little out of it, a little nervous. I don't know, against New Mexico State of all teams, and they lost in the first round. It's the second year in a row they've lost in the first round.
Yeah.
First, the year before that to Maryland, it was the COVID year, and it was just a weird year, and I think even Dan acknowledges that. But so yeah, he knows that they have to come in a little looser. Same thing happens this year. They lose in the semifinals, but I think Dan, I could see when we were talking to him yesterday after the selection show, he seemed a little looser. He wasn't complaining about anything. He wasn't complaining about his seed. He was complimenting other teams. So it was, it wasn't, he wasn't, your classic Dan Hurley, who usually finds something to kind of complain about. But so he's trying to get him looser going into this meeting with Iona, who you wonder if that's, with Rick Pitino on the other bench. I don't know how relaxed you can be as a coach.
Yeah, I was going to say, especially too, where, and again, don't want to really open up this can of worms this early, but could be his future, Big East coaching colleague. We'll have to, break that down later on. Ian, take it away.
Thanks a lot, Joey. And thank you again, Dave, for taking some time here with us. I want to kind of stay on the same track here as Joey and kind of reference a couple of points you made with respect to Danny Hurley's tenure in the NCAA tournament since he's been the head coach at UConn. And yeah, I think the 2021 season's a little tough to gauge because it was the COVID year. And then last year they go down to New Mexico State, and now this year they have their highest seed ever in Hurley's tenure, leading the Huskies to the NCAA tournament. So let's take 2021 out of the equation, but just kind of factor in last year. And you're talking about how they, just the loss last year to Villanova kind of took the wind out of their sails. I guess in your opinion, what makes this year different as the Huskies go into this NCAA tournament?
Well, for one, I think they're a better team, more talented. A guy like Andre Jackson, who of course was on last year's team, has really assumed more of a leadership role, and he leads he's a vocal leader, but he also leads by example with his energy and his play. And I think but they just have more talent. Jordan Hawkins didn't even play last year at the end of the year. Didn't play in the Big East tournament or in the NCAAs. Now was a leading scorer in the Big East during conference play. So I think they're better. And again, I think now they realize the errors of their ways from a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. And I think they're trying to approach this year a little differently.
And I think also what helps UConn as well. I mean, the fact they get to play in Albany, It's really going to be very much like a home game for them in terms of the playing on the East Coast. I really thought they were going to end up in that East region. I just felt like it was destined, and Joey can agree. It just felt like they were so destined to play at MSG. I want to go back to what you said about Andre Jackson here for a second, Dave, because I think we can make the argument he's probably one of the, if not the most athletic player in the Big East right now in terms of what he's able to do. He's not the guy that necessarily fills up the stat sheet, but really does all the intangible stuff on the court. And in the semifinal against Marquette, we saw him get into a lot of foul trouble. He only played about 15 minutes. Really, I mean, in a game that was as close as it was against Marquette, you could argue that if, Andre Jackson doesn't get into that foul trouble, maybe UConn's playing in the Big East final instead of Marquette. Do you expect teams like Iona, or a team, maybe you should say they get to the second round and they play, say, a St. Mary's, do you expect them to exploit that the way Marquette did a little bit?
Yeah, you mean Andre? He absolutely. I mean, he's a guy who can guard just about anyone on the floor. His exuberance really rubs off on the team. He knows he needs to stay out of foul trouble. It's not the first time he's gotten into foul trouble this year. He had been playing really well the prior 4 or 5 games after somewhat of a prolonged slump. He's shooting a little better. He understands he needs to take the ball to the hole more and use his athleticism as opposed to shooting 3-pointers that other defenses are practically giving him. I don't think he's quite as terrible as a 3-point shooter as he's sort of shown at times this year, but he's certainly not great. But he's just got to play under. You got to avoid foul trouble and play a little more under control in terms of not fouling and in terms of not turning the ball over. Because for every really nifty no-look pass or sort of 40-foot bounce pass he can make to a guy on a break, he can throw some away too. So he's he's definitely a big key to their success on Friday.
And Andre and Adama and Alex Caravan, like they were all back 2 years ago. God bless you. When you go back a couple of years ago to when UConn was first in the tournament, when these guys were freshmen, now they're experienced juniors, upperclassmen. These guys have been to the dance before. And now you factor in guys like, Joey Calcaterra. I do agree with you, Dave. I think this is probably the most complete that we've seen UConn, probably in Dan Hurley's tenure so far at UConn, that's now spanning about 5 years, even if you go back to 2 years ago, even with the James Bouknight years. And that's the guys who are now upperclassmen were really the freshmen of that team, and they were just inexperienced. It just feels like to me, and feel free to agree or disagree, that this team should be able now to get over that hump.
Absolutely. I thought, I predicted a week ago, without knowing who their opponents were going to be, that UConn was going to win, kind of get that monkey off the back, win their first game. And even I thought they would get to the Sweet 16. Now, of course, again, it's all about matchups and opponents, and I didn't know who it would be. And when I saw the opponents on Sunday night, again, Iona, when you have, in my opinion, the greatest in-game strategist and coach in my lifetime, Rick Pitino, that's a great thing to have on your side. But UConn has just about everything else on their side in terms of talent and size and everything. So, and you get by that, I wouldn't be terribly scared of St. Mary's. I respect them. I think that conference is maybe a little better than people give it credit for. But St. Mary's or VCU, and they play a very distinctive style that could be troublesome. But I would think UConn should be able to handle those two well. So I thought there was a pretty good draw. I honestly think, it's as strange it is to say, as long as they get past this first round, they could make a nice run.
And I agree with you too, Dave. I think they are at least Sweet 16, if not Elite 8 bound, if they can maybe get past Kansas. But in the meantime, Mike, take it away.
Hey, Dave, once again, thanks for coming on with us. I never mentioned before in there about Andre Jackson and turnovers. I think that's great segue to what I was going to ask you. And we know with Pitino, we know the famed, fast-paced pressure that he likes to play with all his teams and that system. We've seen at times UConn struggle a little bit when it comes to turnovers in certain halves and whatnot. How do you think Hurley's going to adjust to that a little bit? Who's really going to look to run the offense more and adjust to that pressure?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, turnovers have kind of been their biggest bugaboo. They average about 13 a game, which is kind of the bottom third of the Big East, one of the few kind of team statistical categories where they weren't up in the top of the Big East this year. Tristan Newton's their point guard. He's not sort of a classic point guard. He's not He's a 6'5". He's more of a a two guard kind of guy who can penetrate, shoot a little bit. Not your classic kind of point guard like your Kemba Walker or your Shabazz Napier or Talik Brown, who ironically is now on Iona or on the Iona staff as an assistant coach. The pressure could bother UConn, no question. They don't have great ball handlers. Andre Jackson's a facilitator as well. I wouldn't call him a great ball handler. Hassan Diarra is a backup point guard. He turns the ball over quite a bit. The pressure could definitely bother UConn, but I wonder if the pressure that has hurt teams in the MAC this year will affect UConn, a Big East team, the same as it did other teams, sort of mid-majors that did this year. I just wonder if, and I wonder with that in mind, I wonder if Rick will press, how much he'll actually press. He may show it here and there. If it works, he'll continue it. But I wonder if he thinks that and they're not a particularly deep P team, if I'm not mistaken. I wonder if he thinks that the potential for foul trouble and things like that could hurt them. So we'll see what happens. But no question, turnovers and point guard play have been an issue for UConn this season.
Going back to the Big East tournament, we saw them, of course, as we mentioned before, fall in the semifinals. Any positive sort of takeaways you could see? You talked about them wanting to be more looser than last year coming into the national tournament. Any positive takeaways that they can really translate? We saw a little bit of a slump as they got into February, a couple of key losses, but any positive takeaways in terms of how they can make this run throughout the tournament?
Yeah, I mean, up until the Marquette game, by and large, Jordan Hawkins had really started to emerge as a real star, or a real guy they could lean on as a scorer, who could hit big shots. They haven't had the need. They haven't. The thing about UConn is that they've won almost all their games have been by actually all of their wins this year have been by 6 points or more, and many of them by double digits. And they've lost a lot of close games, so they haven't had a lot of times where someone stepped up and kind of hit that big shot, which I think is an issue. I think Jordan Hawkins could be that guy. I think Alex Caravan could be that guy. But I guess to answer your question, really just their overall play over the past couple of weeks and the performances of their better players was a positive sign. Again, some of those guys stubbed their toe against Marquette, but by and large, those guys have been playing well, and the team's been playing well too.
Dave, I look at some of the matchups, especially as we go into the tournament, Iona, and then the potential of, if UConn advances, St. Mary's, VCU, and then, or St. Mary's or VCU, and then the probability of Kansas is pretty high. I look at the game that we saw on Friday night when Andre Jackson and Jordan Hawkins combined 4 of 21 for 12 points, and they faced the player of the year in Tyler Kolek. And, I look at a team like Kansas, and I know that obviously one game at a time, but, for us, Dave, I'm assuming we kind of look ahead just a tiny bit, and we say to ourselves, all right, if they can get to Vegas to take on Kansas, Jalen Wilson, Brady Dick, Kevin McCullough, does this team have the depth to be able to go up against guys like that and a team like that?
Well, depth has been a strength of UConn's for much of the season. When they were 14-0 and just blasting everybody by double digits or more in 13 of those games, they were getting Joey Calcaterra, as you mentioned before. He was coming off the bench and knocking down 3-pointers. Non-conference play. He shot 57% from three, which is just ridiculous. And we're not talking about all cupcakes. We're talking about beating the number one overall seed of the tournament, Alabama, on a neutral court out in Portland, Oregon. Beating Iowa State for the championship of that tournament, another NCAA tournament team. Beating Oregon in that tournament, winning at Florida. I know Florida's not having a great year, but it was a road game against an SEC team. Beating Oklahoma State, which barely missed out the tournament at home. Depth was Donovan Clingan. The best example I can give is that Donovan Clingan, the backup center who only averages 12 minutes a game, was the MVP of the PK Invitational, the backup center. So that just goes to show the depth that they had. Now, when they struggled in January, some of those guys struggled as well. And in fact, Joey Calcaterra really hasn't quite been the shooter he was ever since Big East play began. Klingen's had a couple down moments. A couple of, Naheem Aline and Diarra have fluctuated in their effectiveness. But lately, those guys have been playing well again. The bench came up pretty well in the Big East tournament. And so I do think they have the depth and the talent depth, and certainly the talent to play with the big boys. I mean, they proved it by beating Alabama back in November.
Yeah, it's truly amazing to see also how far these guys have come. Because I remember when you first came on the first time this year, I think this is now you're I think with us now the third time. I think we had brought up how this is a completely revamped team from a season ago when they lost a whole bunch of the seniors and the grads. So, how is all that experience going to, come over into this year? But clearly, it's, they've done a good job. Dave, I got to ask you this, kind of obviously hits close to home for Andre Jackson. He's playing now in his home building. He's from Amsterdam, up in the capital region. And I believe he went to school in the capital region too, and Albany or in that area. So have you heard or have you spoken to him about, what it's like, or has he said anything in the press availability about playing in that building?
Yeah, we talked to him yesterday again after the selection show, and he said his mom texted him and said she was in tears. She was so happy that he was. Of course, his younger brother Marcus plays at Albany, and I talked to his coach, coach at Albany Academy today, or his former coach, who's now actually coaches a prep school in Connecticut, and he was saying how they used to practice that Albany Academy, the team, Andre's high school team used to practice in that arena, played some games in that arena. Like I said, practiced there before they went out to play other tournaments. So he's familiar with that, with those rims and the background and the gym itself. So he's going to have a lot of fans, a lot of family and friends. He's an extremely popular guy. Really, everybody likes Andre, and he's got a lot of people who love him up there in Albany. So he's going to have a lot of people there. It should help him a lot. I don't think it'll be like a distraction or anything. I mean, if anything, it'll probably pump him up a little more. Although I don't know how much more you can pump up Andre Jackson. He's so energetic, and sometimes that's his problem, that which leads to the fouls and the turnovers. And I think Dan needs to settle him down a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, Ian, close us out.
Sure, and Dave, I'm on the Andre Jackson bandwagon right there with you. There are things I was watching him do at the Big East tournament that he has the build, the pure athleticism that we see today from NBA players. I'm not saying he would be, but he resembles kind of that acumen of the type of player we see today in the NBA, and just in terms of what he's able to do on the court. Dave, just to cap us off for the night here, I want to ask just one player who really had a nice Big East tournament, and we haven't really mentioned yet here has been Newton. Can you talk a little bit in terms of the impact you can expect him to have in the NCAA tournament in terms of talking about UConn's depth?
Tristan Newton?
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, as he goes, often UConn goes. And that's kind of, it's not necessarily surprising when you're talking about a team's point guard, but I think they're 12-2 when he scores in double figures. I think, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's very close to, in their 25 wins, he averages 10.9 points per game. In their 8 losses, he's averaged like 7.5. So again, when he struggled, the team has struggled. Terrible. One of the worst games I've ever seen, and I think he'd even admit that, against St. John's at home, and UConn lost that game, which is kind of their biggest sort of WTF loss of the season. So, he's key. He's big. Handling UConn or Iona's pressure, a lot's going to be on his shoulders. So, but he stepped up big. He's actually the first and only player in UConn men's basketball history to notch two triple doubles in the same season, which is amazing when you think of the players who've been here. So, he's a good all around player. When he's on, the team's on, and certainly they'll be hoping he's on this week and moving forward.
All right. Well, Dave, cannot thank you enough for making us a part of your Monday night and coming on here to talk with us about UConn and their first round matchup and hopefully beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, UConn men's basketball beat reporter for Hearst CT Media and CTinsider.com, Dave Borges. Dave, thank you so much for coming on, and enjoy the first round. It's going to be a ton of fun up in Albany. Short drive for you, which is a real nice thing.
Yeah, not bad at all. Not bad at all. And then a trip to Vegas afterward would be nice too.
Absolutely. Dave, thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a few short moments with Xavier right after this.